I didn't tag you on social media or anything. I don't think you're on Twitter,
No.
although I believe your granddaughter is. And I'll tell you why I know that in a second.
Okay. And I love her to pieces.
She clearly loves you too. Okay. Come on in, everybody. It's going to restart here. Give people a few more minutes. Come on in, everybody. Turn it down a little bit. We are at Tennessee Holler, tnholler.com is where you can find us. I am Justin, the founder of the Holler. We have social media feeds on Facebook and Twitter, as most of you I hope know by now. And we also have hollers all throughout the state now, and that's thanks to your support. So chip in if you can. We'd also like to send a shout out to Elisa Parker. If you're buying or selling a home in Middle Tennessee, do it through her. That's a way to support us. And then we also now have a new sponsor, Rubenfeld Law Office. We appreciate their support also. Today, we are going to talk to Cindy Schueman, who's here joining us from Cookeville. She wrote a letter in the Herald Citizen recently that caught my eye, caught a lot of people's eye. It was a strong statement that she put out about her feelings about the Putnam County Republican Party she used to lead. She was the Republican Party chair and now basically sent out a warning saying the people that are running the party now are people to be wary of, to put it mildly. And, she had some very strong words, and that's not something that we see happen too often, especially here in Tennessee. So I wanted to talk to her today and give her a chance to kind of elaborate on why she said that and what she meant by it. Sydney, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I really do appreciate you coming on here. Again, I know that probably took a lot to write the letter that you wrote to the Herald Citizen. I'm just going to flash the headline here for a second. It says, "Communities should not trust Republican leadership." And then the end of the letter, I thought, sort of summarized the whole thing, and we can kind of go into it a little bit. But it said, "I'm appalled at the bottom feeders of the current Republican Party's leadership. To be so filled with malice and hatred, the community should not trust any of these PRCP board members, especially if they're running for office, nor support their businesses when they're clearly racist." Those are really strong words. And, I would just love to ask, what made you decide to write that?
I am the executive director of Impact Leadership, and it is a leadership program. We service underrepresented populations in as much as we offer a leadership program that is typically unaffordable to many underrepresented people. And it doesn't mean people of color, but primarily in this area, poverty is more likely to be with people of color. Now, that's the Cookeville area. I'm not an expert on the area, but Monterey is in Putnam County. Their poverty is largely Hispanic. So it does vary. And I know that the greater Appalachia area has a lot of Caucasian poverty as well. There's just in general a lot of poverty in Tennessee. But we developed a program to encourage, motivate, educate, include people that could not otherwise afford leadership training. We introduced them to many nonprofit boards in the Upper Cumberland area and try to match them with a board so that they get invested in the community. I wrote this because I think that it was stooping to a new low to attack a nonprofit. All of the nonprofits that share um, social conscious efforts all feel like if they can attack impact, they can attack any one of us. Anything from Habitat to Helping Hands, where they give money to people who can't pay their light bill. So that was one issue. The other issue is we have a very strong DEI program and policy. DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. We encouraged the very people that are underrepresented to try to run for office and get involved in the community so that their voice could be heard. So, affiliated with Impact or Impact Leadership, there were 3 African American candidates who ran for office. So, those 3 African American candidates were targeted, and they're also affiliated with Impact or Impact Leadership. So, I felt it was not only bottom feeding to pick on a nonprofit, but to target the only 3 African Americans running in local election. It's not common in this area, in this community, for that much. I want to say, why would we get in the pig with pig pens unless you want to get dirty, right? They got dirty in this campaign, and it's insensitive to any people of color, that it's insensitive to all of the corporations that follow federal policy to have a DEI program. It's insensitive to the work of the Highlands Economic Group, who go out and recruit foreign companies like Horman, Ficosa, Portobello. If the county is 70 to 80% Republican, if almost every elected official is Republican, they didn't have anything to worry about to go this low. Instead of saying, gee, these are some positive reasons why you should vote Republican, fiscal responsibility, smaller government, whatever they wanted to say. But I was absolutely incensed at this kind of attack on their website, don'tpelosiputnam.com.
So, okay, so let's talk about Don't Pelosi Putnam, which I don't know if I have the graphic here with me. But Don't Pelosi Putnam is a website that was created. I think the Putnam County Republican Party has their name on it, so they're behind it
Yes.
openly. And what did they say about these candidates on Don't Pelosi Putnam that bothered you so much? Because again, just for people who are just joining us, the letter in the Herald Citizen that Cindy wrote was very strongly worded, clearly racist, should not trust them, filled with malice and hatred, bottom feeders. So what was it specifically that caused you to speak so strongly about the leaders of the party you once led?
In the attack on Impact, it uses the creation of that don'tpelosiputnam.com. They use an antiquated, outdated definition of diversity that refers to physical characteristics, physical features. It's like right out of post-slavery days, when people would try to say diversity is, even if the skin color might not be as dark, there you got it, as dark as you would refer to a black person, but a broad nose or thick lips, or, it's a very antiquated, keep going down, diversity and division. So here's the other thing. So they have this terrible um, definition of diversity, but in this divide and conquer idea, they said that diversity starts with div, and so does divide. And well, it's hard. It's hard.
Oh,
I mean, if you wanna, if you think you really want to be the smartest person in the room and say, well, gee, they both come from the same Latin root word. Um, it's still it's hard to argue with stupid. I mean, that's just a stupid way of saying diversity is bad because it divides and conquers.
right. Well, so let me just, I want to take that to sort of a bigger point because, one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you is, you're talking about your party in Cookeville, but these are issues that are in the Republican Party in the whole state and in the whole country, really. You mentioned DEI and you're talking about it as a positive. You'd be in the minority in your party as somebody who would lift up DEI as a positive step. And, I agree with you. And I know a lot of people do, but that in itself has become an act of bravery in today's Republican Party. Do you find that there are people who think DEI is a positive in the Republican Party these days, or are you in the minority there?
Well, based on my letter to the editor, I have received tons and tons of people in this community who feel the same way I do,
Good.
who would largely be Republican. Um, and of course, I believe in reaching across the aisle. Um, inclusion
Well,
is
what we're
inclusion.
doing here today.
Yeah. Um, and the way the country has been polarized, in that everything is politicized. It doesn't matter if it's issues at church, issues in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, issues in the political arena. It's been terribly divisive to be
Mhm.
polarized. It's just awful. And I'm old enough that I've lived long enough that I've never seen it like this before.
So the leaders of your party right now, I don't know the Cookeville area that well. I do know there's a few voices that are louder than others. I didn't know if what you were talking about had to do with this, but I do want to at least mention it because it feels at least adjacent to the issue that you're talking about, which is this mailer that went out about City Councilman Mark Miller. And I'm just going to show this so people have a little bit of context because I want to ask you your thoughts on it. This was the mailer, King of the Cockroaches. Don't Pelosi Putnam was the website that was on it. Again, that website is linked back to the Republican Party. This was on the back: promotes diversity, knows gays, globalist, believes in science, time to drain the swamp, call the exterminator. Really, really ugly stuff. Now, right when that happened, the party itself came out and said, we didn't have anything to do with this. They posted on their Facebook page, this wasn't us. And Dave Rowland, who, is involved with the party and has been involved with the Don't Pelosi Putnam website, also said this was meant to smear us. And I couldn't help but notice that in all of the posts saying that this was intended to smear the party and Dave Rowland, they always link back to Don't Pelosi Putnam, even with their $500 reward. So even though they're saying this wasn't them, they are sort of benefiting from it by using this incident to drive traffic to Don't Pelosi Putnam, which is the website that you are talking about. So I have to ask you, first of all, what are your general thoughts on that mailer? And then does any part of you think that this is all some what would be diabolical scheme to drive traffic to that website?
Well, I send a message to Mark Miller. Yay, you know gays. Yay, you believe in science. Yay,
Well,
you believe in diversity. I mean, what better
Cindy,
reason to vote for
how
somebody?
are you a Republican? Like,
Well,
these are things that,
because
that's
I'm
unbelievable.
a Republican with a social conscience.
Okay,
And quite
great.
frankly, I moved here from the Chicago area, which is largely Democratic, Chicago area, not necessarily the whole state. But diversity there is a way of life. It's not even a conversation.
Right.
Here, I feel like I'm in the middle of the Hatfield and McCoy kind
Yeah.
of attitude where there's a Bible in one hand and a gun in the other. And oh my God, you better not touch my Second Amendment right. But heaven forbid that you give rights 13 amendments 13, 14, 15 to anybody else. And the hypocrisy of the Bible and the gun is what really is driving called America's Nations. And he defines the upper Appalachian mentality to a T. That was more culture shock moving here than living in Egypt for a month.
But how did you become the chair of this party? Because what first of all, when were you the chair of the party? I guess I don't know
Four
that.
years ago and 6 years ago.
Okay, so recently. So have you really seen the party shift that much just in that short amount of time?
Yes,
And do you think it was Trump?
yes, because I totally believe that Trump gave the voiceless a voice, which many elite politicians do not. And that is division in and of itself, and it's frightening.
Hold on, let me just make sure I understand what you're saying. You believe that he gave the voiceless a voice, meaning in
Meaning,
your eyes in a positive way or a negative way?
well, I think it's positive because rural people were not being included in a lot of political agendas.
Okay.
But because Trump also seemed to for open the door for kind of the white nationalist attitude. Um, it has empowered and emboldened them, and they don't see diversity as a positive thing.
Okay, so first of all, people are thanking you for speaking out right now. I want you to know that. We even have State Representative Gloria Johnson on here saying it's most often the women who have the courage to stand up and speak out, which she is a living, breathing example of up on the Hill. So let me just tell you, I guess maybe it'd be useful for me to just give you my perspective on it and or what you're saying, and you can tell me where I'm right or wrong here. But I think you're onto something there. I think he did sort of tap into something where people were feeling unheard and made them some promises. We could probably argue whether or not he kept some of those promises, but you know it was kind of the Trojan horse for the faction that you're talking about to sort of take over the party, which seems to have happened. And you are maybe a living, breathing example of that, where now the party has become that, I would say more nefarious faction of the people that we're talking about. He maybe gave voice to, the white rural voter, but also gave voice to the white Christian nationalist voter. And as Marjorie Taylor Greene just said openly, that's what they want to lean into now. And we're seeing that more and more, especially here in Tennessee, where I believe, that has really taken hold. So, you know, overall, would you say it has gone too far?
Well, of course. I mean, there's I call it the lunatic fringe, the bell curve, either the right or the left. They both have that lunatic fringe. But it's interesting since most all of our elected officials, our county mayor and our city mayor, have both openly said they were Republican. They have both supported impact financially and verbally and with all of our events. And so most of the leadership that are the local politicians, so not so much city council and not so much county commissioners, but the elected Republican officials and the judges would all be more moderate. And so for the party to stoop to this new low, um, they've all voiced their their support and concern to me that this has this does not have their stamp of approval at all.
Okay, so I want to point something out here. You are extremely brave for writing what you did. In many ways, more brave than even Cheney. She's in D.C., safe up there. You're in Cookville. Like anybody who's watching this right now, we all know what it's like to be in rural Tennessee, where you don't have really a platform other than writing a letter like that. And that's why I wanted to lift up what you did here, because I think it's really commendable. But this momentum that you're talking about that has taken your party from you to what's in there now that you call hate filled and racist, that momentum is not going to stop until people like yourself and more than just you not only write letters but also decide it has gone too far. I can't continue to support this with my volunteer efforts, with my vote, with my money, that kind of thing. Is there any chance of that happening? Like, I'm not here to like pin you to the wall on like who are you supporting in an election or anything like that, but at what point does it go too far where you have to show that there are some consequences for your own party in the form of your support?
Absolutely. Um, the problem with voting is it always takes 2, 4, 6 years sometimes to transition a community. But um, it's hard when you don't want to blast the level-headed, logical, critical thinking, um, conservative, moderate Republican who is in office. So I don't want to blast the whole of the Republicans because we do have some very good Republican leaders. It's the ones who have hijacked the party with dominance and domineering attitudes. So, for example, in that Don't Pelosi Putnam, they refer to us as cultural Marxists. And I beg to differ with you that the brown shirts of the Nazis and the black shirts of the fascists were the domineering hijackers, not the moderate people.
Right. I think we would have a different definition of moderate, though, probably because, I think the people that you're talking about that are the good, well-meaning leaders of the party, like at the end of the day, a lot of them vote the same way, say a lot of the same things. It just might be not with the kind of blatant racism that you're talking about. So, and that's, I guess, a story for a different day. But you know, what I kind of want to say is like it seems like in Cookville and rural Tennessee, the word Democrat has a very, distasteful meaning out there. Would you agree with that? Like what does the D mean to people in your area?
Well, I know that it means liberal, and most rural people, in fact, even rural people in Pennsylvania, are Republican because they're not liberal.
What does liberal mean to you? I hope it's okay that we're having this conversation. It's one that I've been dying to have with someone like yourself for a very long time. I'm fascinated by it. I'm not trying to, put you under the gun here. I just think we're having an important conversation here, and I want to try to drill down on it a little bit. I hope that's all right.
That's fine.
Okay.
I believe that um, the sociology of society changes almost every decade, but certainly every two. Growing up in the 50s, we saw tremendous change in the 60s. They fought capitalism with the concept of free love until they grew up. If you if you kind of follow that logic,
Okay.
um, we all kind of buy into capitalism with the idea of freedom and the American dream. And if Americans struggle to achieve that with guidelines and social behavior concepts, then what I think sometimes happens with liberal agendas is they take the rug out from under. They pull the bottom out and say it's open and free to anybody.
So you're talking about immigration?
Well, maybe I'm not opposed to immigration, and I
And
don't.
the reason I'm asking you this is like, you just said that you think Mark Miller knowing gays is a good thing, which is not something that, a lot of
Right,
Republicans would say. Believes in science, good thing. Fighting for DEI, you think it's a good thing.
good
Like
thing.
these are all, ideals that most liberals, all liberals, frankly, would agree with. So I'm just wondering, like, where that definite, like, you're using liberal as a bad word, which is normal. I mean, I understand that here in Tennessee that is a bad word. Like, I've come to understand that in my 6 years here. But I'm just wondering, like, what it triggers in your mind when you think of liberal. Like, what's the issue?
Well, being fiscally responsible,
Okay.
and I mean, it could be just the narrative that I hear. Um, I can't validate it for sure, but there's always complaints about Democratic run areas are the least physically responsible. I know that Tennessee is very,
It's not true, by the way, but go ahead.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, 8 of the 10 poorest states are red states. So I'm just saying, but I
That is,
understand that that's the narrative.
but the state Tennessee is not in the red; it's in the black.
Okay, if you'll permit me to answer that one,
Go ahead.
okay. So you're right about that, but we also get 40% of our budget from the federal government. So basically, we say we're fiscally responsible, but we're a taker state. We're one of the most dependent states in the country. So we take money from the federal government and then we debt shame the federal government and claim to be fiscally responsible. If the federal government were to cut off Tennessee tomorrow, we would have a real problem. That poverty that you talk about, which we're at the bottom in poverty, at the bottom in infant maternal mortality, we would have a real problem on our hands if that federal government we debt shame all the time were to cut us off. So that would be the counter to that. And I'm not trying to convert you here today or
No,
anything
no,
like
no,
that.
no. But and I agree with that.
Okay.
And I would also add that Tennessee doesn't quite dole out the money for education the way many other states do.
Very true. Exactly. So there's a whole laundry list of those. And I see
Yeah.
Gapper. I'll get to your comments later, Gapper, but I see you saying, so those Democrat ran cities in those red states have nothing to do with it. The truth is, Nashville, especially here in Tennessee, subsidizes hospitals and schools in the entire state to an outrageous degree. So you have that completely backwards. That's a story for another day. I want to talk to Cindy a little bit more. Before I do, I want to show that I'm not the only one who's proud of her for taking the stand. Her granddaughter has also spoken up. This is her granddaughter on Twitter saying, proud of grandma for using her voice and resources to shed light on issues within the Cookeville Republican Party. So, what you've done here is really quite brave. We really do appreciate it. And I think it's important that we say that in the same way that it's important that, even though I disagree with Rep. Cheney on a lot of things, I think it's really important that she stood up for democracy on the national level. Have you watched those hearings, by the way? I guess I'd ask you that one.
I have watched some of them.
Look at you. You are like passing with flying colors this test. Do you think anybody else in Cookeville has watched?
Yes, I
Oh,
do,
good.
because it's been conversations with some of my colleagues.
Wow, that's fantastic to hear. Uh, Speaking of conversations in Cookeville, this is a debate that I've been having with a friend of mine, and I want to know how you feel about it. You have Dave Rowland in Cookeville. He is a prominent figure in the party in conservative circles. I believe he was in DC on January 6th. He owns billboards in
Yeah.
the area, multiple billboards, and programs them regularly, like almost in direct response to what's going on in the news. How much of a factor do Dave Rowland's billboards have and play in the conversation in Putnam County?
Well, in this instance, huge. The the idea to smear good people, Mark Miller, Mark Hutchins, Rob Owens, D. Prince, Johnny Johnny Wheeler. I'm missing one. Luke Eldridge, 3 white, 3 African American. All of them have been in service to this community in phenomenal ways. So to put up a big billboard showing voting records, who voted Democrat, who voted Republican.
They did that?
Oh yes, on
Put
that
their
don't
voting records on a billboard?
and in that Don't Pelosi Putnam, it's there also. There's 3 tabs.
But they really put it on the directly on
Yes,
the billboard?
they put it on the billboard.
And
And
it's
the
and it's
funny
3
thing,
black candidates?
3 black candidates and 3 white candidates.
Oh,
And they're
and
the
3 white.
only 3 black candidates in the whole race.
Mhm.
Um, but the interesting thing is there's a Republican running, Ron Chafin, and because he's Republican running, they didn't show his record, but he voted Democrat in 2020. So it's interesting the hypocrisy of the way they want to define an independent as really being wolf in sheep's clothing because they're really a Democrat.
Mhm.
The hypocrisy behind everything that they're doing is just so flawed. It's so blatant that I would have been a fool not to call them out.
Well, it's great that you did. And just to go back to real quick, the billboards, that impacts conversation in Putnam County and Cookeville in a real way?
It did, and
Does
it
it in general?
um, people have their sphere of influence.
Right.
My sphere of influence is not the same as Dave Rowland's. So he has his group of people that are praising him for doing what he's doing. And I have a group of people that are feel grateful that that I just am going to say it. It's bullshit. And you can't.
You're allowed to say that on here, Cindy.
Oh,
Curse
good.
away. Curse away.
Well, I got to tell you, this drove me to where I don't think I could. For a couple of days, I couldn't even get a complete sentence out with 10 swear words in it. Um, but you have good people in this community, and we all pulled together for the tornado. Nobody was asked what their political affiliation was. Nobody was disregarded because of the color of their skin. Nobody went without diapers or food or a place to live. I just, I marveled at the unity only to come back for an election year to this bottom feeding pig pen smear campaign. It's awful.
I completely agree with you, and especially in the primaries where it becomes kind of a race to the bottom to get that primary nomination, but at the end of the day, we are a two-party system. I wish we weren't, and that's a story for a different day, but we are. The only real counterbalance we have to what you're talking about is the Democratic Party. Now, you could argue that right now it's not really one in the areas like Cookeville and Putnam because, it's not really happening there. And maybe people need to run independent, and maybe that's really the answer. I don't know. But what I would ask is and you don't have to do this if you don't want, but as an exercise, if you were to walk into the Putnam County Democrats meeting or the Tennessee Democratic Party meeting, what would your advice be to them as far as and not that they would take it, and there's going to be people who say, why don't let them dictate, you're asking the wrong person, and maybe I am, but I would be curious to know, what would your advice be to Democrats if they were to try to be a more relevant counterbalance in a place like Putnam County?
Well, I've only lived here since 2011, but I will tell you that the first few people who voted Republican in Putnam County, they they tell funny stories about going to vote Republican, and they were told they can't because there were no Republicans. So that's only probably
Amazing.
25,
I
30 years
know. I
ago.
hear about that too. That was the whole state. Yeah, the state was
Yeah.
blue until
So
about that.
when
Yeah.
the Democratic Party changed,
Yeah.
And now what I think we're looking at is the Republican Party might be changing. There's probably a lot of switching. I call it code switching, but there's probably a lot of switching that's going on because people, the truth is, I don't think anybody anymore is a true Republican or a true Democrat, unless they're in the lunatic fringe, maybe. But um, on any given issue, we all kind of have lived experiences, whether it's you know relative to the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, gun control, or freedom of speech. I think freedom of speech should be tempered with as much truth as possible, but that doesn't apply anymore, and especially with politicians, it just it seemed to have evaporated. Abortion, the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Um, I
How
think
is that playing there?
both sides, both sides have feelings about it, but
Are there
typically
any Republicans that think this might have gone too far, like forcing teenage girls to carry to term that have been raped by uncles, that kind of thing? Is that something that doesn't sit well?
abortion doesn't sit well,
Right.
and you have a double whammy here with the being a Bible Belt. So you have the principles of the Bible, but quite often until it's in your home, until it happens to your child or your family in some way, you don't have a realistic, a credible opinion to add to the trauma. And to make it illegal is just another trauma. But on the other hand, uh, um, letting it be birth control, letting it go beyond the first trimester, all of those things affect people, and they affect people differently.
Well, only because you're like dangerously close to actually outlining a compromise of some sort there, which again, I say every time I talk about this, I am not the authority on, and like my opinion doesn't matter on this, but you sounded like you were almost thinking, well, if it was closer to the first trimester, and there was some way to have it not be birth control, that you do think like safe and legal in some circumstances, which I think is actually where most of the country is, might play a little bit better. So I think you're hinting that there might be more common ground than we realize, even on a topic like abortion.
Yeah,
But the issue ends up being that we have like this conversation right now that I'm having with you, which I really appreciate, by the way. Like I've been trying to have this conversation with somebody for a really long time. And when I asked you, I thought you were going to ignore me. You took me up on it, which I was shocked by. I just think these conversations don't happen enough. There aren't spaces where they happen. There aren't rooms where they happen. There aren't TV shows where they happen. So, I do believe that we actually have a chance to find more common ground than we realize. There's just not a lot of opportunities for us to find it. And, it makes me sad.
it is. It's sad. It's sad when people aren't recognized for their diversity of thought, their diversity of experiences, and they're not. The thing I liked a lot about Mother Teresa is that she gave the worst of the worst people dignity. And that's what I think is missing in a lot of these um, divisive arguments is just giving people their dignity. I I have a hard time arguing with ignorance. And so we applied a principle that you can't force diversity without educating first. And in our program, we educate them to what cultural diversity is, because it isn't just skin color. In fact, only 1/1000th of your DNA determines your skin, hair, and eye color. 999 thousandths of your DNA is the same as somebody else's.
That's good to know. I didn't realize that. So, I think that just the fact that you exist is a little eye-opening for me anyway, that there are Cindy's out there. I don't know how many of you there are. So we've talked a lot about how we got here. I want to talk a little bit about where we're going before I let you out of here. And you've given me so much of your time. I appreciate it. Um, you know, I think it's safe to say you're in the minority in your party with a lot of these positions that you're taking, which may be why you're not the chair anymore. I don't know. But, you know,
No,
where,
the
okay,
chair has terms, but
there's terms.
also
Okay, that's not why.
I'm I might be the minority here in this
Yes.
geographic area, but I wouldn't be the minority everywhere.
So you don't think so? Okay, so that's what I'm asking because, you know, I am not a fan of the former president. I do believe he still has a pretty strong hold on the party. Uh, as far as where we're going next, like, do you think it's possible for people who share more of your views to take control of this party? Or do you think that the people you keep calling the fringe, who I kind of would argue maybe are not as fringe as one might believe, the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world, like I think she could win an election here. I do you see your party coming back from the ledge, or do you worry that we're just getting started?
I worry that there'll be some kind of a shift, a transition, a split, um, and I think we certainly saw that over the last maybe 30 years with the Democratic Party, and I think we could see that with the Republican Party. It's not We're not galvanized. We're not, and so that it's creed or chaos, right? If we don't all have the same creed and we're not galvanized, then there's chaos. There's a void to be filled. Somehow it's going to be filled.
Well, I hope that you're a one of the voices that helps to fill that. Just as a final question here, and you don't have to answer it, but I just it's eating at me, so I have to ask it. Could you ever bring yourself to vote for a Democrat?
Absolutely.
Look at that. I'm going to leave it there. Cindy, thank you so much for listening. I hope you and I can keep talking. If you ever have any questions about anything, I'd love to be a sounding board for you, not publicly if necessary, publicly if you want. But I think it's important to have this dialogue. So I hope we can keep this bridge open. And I really, really appreciate you coming on here. And I know your granddaughter does too.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much. Keep speaking out, okay? And
Okay.
feel free to send us if you write any more uh, heated letters.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Wow, that was something else. I'm really happy that happened. I did not expect it to ever, and so what a pleasant surprise that was when she took me up on the offer to talk about these things because I'm up at the Capitol a lot. They don't want to talk to me. Granted, I'm usually asking tougher questions, but I asked some tough questions and she answered them. So, and I appreciate that she did. And, I hope that there's more of that to come. There's some insights there that I really didn't expect to hear that, there are Republicans who don't think DEI is the end of the world and who actually think diversity is a good thing and who thinks nose gaze is a plus. Uh, you know, I wasn't sure they were still out there, especially in Cookeville and Putnam County. And it's a genuine relief, not only to hear that Cindy's out there, but that she's writing letters in Putnam County in the Herald Citizen. Like, I ran for Congress in 20 what was it, 16, 18. And, most of my district was very red. Like I think more red than Putnam. Wayne County, Hohenwald, like those are places that make Cookeville look like Nashville. I mean, so and you go out there and they haven't talked to a Democrat in a really long time. So to write a letter in a paper like that takes some guts. It takes some real guts. And what we were missing right now are Republicans with guts, frankly, to stand up to their own party, because there's only so much Democrats can do to push back. It gets dismissed because it's where it's coming from. They can say the same things, but it's going to have a lot more of an impact if it's coming from Cindy. If that letter was written by Gloria Johnson, nobody would have cared. It wouldn't have meant anything. Same exact letter, same words. But coming from a former Republican Party chair, it means a lot. And, I would hope that more Republicans out there look at the situation right now as an opportunity to, even the slightest level of courage is going to be heroic right now. What Kinzinger and Cheney and even Pence are doing, they're doing their jobs. They're just not overthrowing democracy, not participating in an insurrection. Like, that's the bare minimum, but that's heroic right now, because I believe we're very close to the edge. And I didn't say this to Cindy, I didn't want to I want to spare her a rant, but I'm very concerned about where we are right now in terms of our democracy. I think the people that she's warning about have a much firmer grip on her party and the state, frankly, than people realize. And if what's going on here is also going on in some of these other state houses where, they control things, maybe not the governorship, but they control the state houses. And we get to a point in a few years where we have another contested election, or we have somebody else, if Trump runs again, let's say, and loses but says he wins, and now we've got things being thrown back to the state legislature, and you've got secretaries of state and governors that have committed to questioning our election and saying it was stolen. Where will we be in January of 2025? Where will we be? And I think it's people like Cindy that have the power to save us from that place. And so I wanted to talk to her and have a conversation. And I genuinely appreciate that she did that. Don says, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Don's always good for some quips here and there. Barbara says we're in a failed democracy, which it's kind of what I'm saying, but I don't want to say that, because I still believe we can come back from this somehow. Kim saying, well, it was a good experiment. You guys are killing me. Let's see what else. As a Canadian, I'm terrified about your democracy. Peaceful blessings be with you. Zena, you are right to be scared. And then Don again says we are teetering on the edge of the abyss. 2022 and 24 will be messes, disasters, catastrophes. That's very much what I'm worried about. And I don't frankly see enough concern about it, even still in our public discourse. Yes, people understand what happened and are concerned, but I don't think they're quite as concerned yet as they still need to be. And so I have taken to this platform as much as I possibly can to sound the alarm. I know that the people who watch this have heard it, and I hope that you will take this message to the people in your lives, because at the end of the day, that's all we can do. Gapper says, I need to have a call in for our live streams. It's hard to debate you. I'm happy to do it. And I can do you one better, because I've offered this a number of times, and I'll get back to offering it. But forget about a call-in number. We can do a call-in number, but if you want the link, I'll literally give you the link to come on and be a guest like Cindy was, and we can have the discussion face-to-face, which I think might be more productive. When Cassie was here, I used to offer that all the time. We would give the link to whoever wants it to come on and have a discussion. If you want that, happy to do it. Otherwise, I could try to set up a call-in number. That's been tough to figure out. If you have a way for me to do that, please send me the link. I would like to do that, honestly. So I just haven't figured out how to do it. Maybe I haven't put enough effort in. All right. That's pretty much all I've got. A couple of other things just to show. As Cindy was saying, it has gotten dirty. This is in Chattanooga. The Republican Party, that's the state party, put out these mailers about Commissioner David Sharp, saying that he would open the door for school shooters because he wants school security guards instead of school resource officers. They're trying to make it seem like he doesn't want anybody protecting our schools, which is not true. He has said he wants a school security guard in every single school, which they can't afford because they have school resource officers, which are harder to hire and harder to find. And to back up his point, here is the Grundy County uh, Republicans, I think, or the Grundy County Commission has come out and said that they want to do what Hamilton County did, which is, have these school security officers. I'm having trouble finding the graphic right. Oh, here it is. So security concerns Grundy County after a gun was brought to school. Then you see the quote down here at the bottom right saying the board is exploring whether it's feasible to have its own security force like Hamilton County has chosen to do. So on the left, the state Republican Party is accusing David Sharp of opening the door for school shooters. And on the right, the Grundy County Commission wants to do what David Sharp, the Democrat, led the fight to do. So it has gotten, it's really ugly stuff. And, Pam Sohn wrote a letter about it. And then this is Tucker McClendon, who is a Republican. I think he's the chair of the school board party, speaking out like Cindy did, saying, as a member of the Tennessee Republican Party, I'm ashamed our party would send something like this. And then he says, it's completely false. I worked with David Sharp to start the idea of full coverage in schools with the school security officer program, which has a much better success rate of hiring ex-cops and ex-military to keep our schools safe. So again, Tucker McClendon, a Republican, speaking out against his own party for these really ugly attacks on people. One, as Cindy said, was racist in her part of town, and here it was using school shootings to attack David Sharp as being opening the door to them, when in fact he is actually leading the way to get more security in schools that even the Grundy County Commission wants to follow suit with. So that is something that I just wanted to bring up because I think it's also relevant because Tucker McClendon is another Republican speaking out. So please, Republicans, speak out. And when you do, we will be happy to amplify that you're doing that. It's really important that you do it. And then as a very last thing here, speaking of speaking out, another thing that crosses party lines is the defense of our public schools. You've seen Governor Lee catch a lot of heat from Republicans across the state at school boards for letting Larry Arnn of Hillsdale rip our teachers. Tomorrow, there will be a rally in Nashville for our public schools. It's been posted by a number of organizations, and I am going to try to get there. And I encourage anybody in the Nashville area to try to get there also to defend our public schools. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Appreciate that you do. Please spread the word and encourage the Cindys of the world to speak out also. Take care.